Hey there guys, this is your host Richard with another marvellous video. We're almost a season and a half into the narrative of House of the Dragon, and finally the inevitable seems to be on the cards. The Great Targaryen Civil War. The first 2 episodes of Season 2 dedicated a lot more time to the build-up, and now the 3rd episode has set things in motion. In this video, we'll break down the episode in great detail and even explore the possible implications of the eventful ending. There'll be a few major spoilers along the way, so you have been warned. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How does the Battle of the Burning Mill impact the war? The episode opens with a quick glimpse of the horrors of the war, when a minor verbal conflict between House Bracken and House Blackwood ends up in a full-blown bloody battle after one of them claims to support King Aegon and the other Queen Rhaenyra. We get a look at the mutilated corpses littering the battlefield after the war. It's slightly disappointing that the entire battle sequence is kept off-screen, and we only get to see the horrifying outcome of the bloody conflict. On this note, the director of the episode, Geeta Vasant Patel, revealed how she would have loved to choreograph a detailed war scene, but the focus of the story was elsewhere. Besides, it wouldn't have been an emotionally enriching battle because the characters involved are new and people wouldn't really relate to them here. However, the impact of this skirmish on the upcoming war is paramount, as we see from the discussions on both camps. The fight between the Blackwoods and the Brackens have continued for decades, and now the fact that they both declared for opposing sides in the Targaryen Civil War pushes things over the edge. What starts off as an innocent boundary conflict results in the first significant clash in the war, and it's a solemn reminder of how things are getting a bit too real for comfort. Does Harrenhal reflect the troubled mind of Daemon? This is easily one of the most bizarre moments in the episode, and the confusion on Daemon's face says it all. Previously, we saw him fly out on his dragon after a bitter argument with Rhaenyra, and this episode reveals that he's arrived in Harrenhal. The visuals of the great castle aren't promising, and everything seems to be in ruins. Rainwater's leaking everywhere, and there are hardly any guards to challenge Daemon before he gets to the inner chambers of the castle. It turns out that the only member of the family remaining at Harrenhal is Simon Strong, the great uncle of Larys, and he doesn't have the stomach to put up a fight. When Daemon demands them to yield the castle, he readily agrees and offers him a venison dinner along with ownership. He states that his interests on political matters are limited, and he readily surrenders the castle to Daemon, probably because he thinks of this as the best immediate option. Well, you surely don't offend a capable dragon rider while living in a broken-down castle with limited defenses. Besides, Daemon promises to prepare the castle for the bigger battles that lie ahead, and restoration of the castle will ultimately benefit Simon Strong. However, what deserves more attention here is Daemon's state of mind. He hallucinates young Rhaenyra, and there's something about his behavior that doesn't exactly scream normal. Harrenhal has such a dark and gloomy ambience with rainwater pouring everywhere and scattered ruins that it can trouble anyone's mind. Daemon already has to deal with a lot of his inner demons, and it seems like spending a lot of time here can prove to be fatal for his mental health.
You are fortunate you took it no further.
Is Rhaenyra's counsel showing a sign of treason? You might admire her, love her, or hate her, but all of you must admit that Rhaenyra has the most disappointing council members by her side. Now that Daemon's away trying to make amends for antagonizing Rhaenyra, she's left with a bunch of people, none of which makes a strong impact on the viewers. More importantly, they're not really in sync with Rhaenyra and her decisions, and keep challenging her actions with snide remarks. Rhaenyra's probably the only wise mind that Rhaenyra has working by her side. In a great example of the silliness of the council, they suggest that all of Rhaenyra's dragons should be sent into battle, but thankfully she doesn't agree to this hasty decision. In this episode, there's a shocking moment when the council members even suggest that Rhaenyra should go into hiding and let the members decide the course of the battle. It's a daring suggestion, and it's immediately met with a strict response from her. She calls out the thought as an act of treason, and it serves as a warning to the council members to calculate the next words carefully. But do we spot a few unhappy members in the council, and will these disgruntled faces change sides when the time comes? Well, we can't really vouch for the loyalty of those in Rhaenyra's council, and this could well be the case in the near future. Consequences of Myssaria's actions that saved Rhaenyra. In the previous episode, there were hints that Mysaria was the one who spotted the assassin sent to get rid of Rhaenyra, and she alerted the guards just in time. It resulted in the duel between the twin brothers Arik and Eric, and there's a scene in this episode where the brothers are buried together. We soon get to see the implications of Myssaria's actions as the White Worm is thanked by Rhaenyra herself for saving her life. Instead of opting for a hefty reward, Mysaria offers to be of service to the Queen. The character reminds us a lot of Spider, the Master of Whisperers in Game of Thrones, because their philosophies have a lot in common. Mysaria also wants the welfare of the common folk, and her concerns for Rhaenyra come from the realization that she's a more merciful ruler than Aegon can ever be.
Good morrow, Your Grace, my lords.
What will be the aftermath of King Aegon's incompetent council? If Rhaenyra has to deal with a dysfunctional council, King Aegon isn't too far behind, and even he sits with a group of men who rarely agree with each other. In the absence of Otto Hightower, who's been replaced as the Hand of King by Ser Criston, the council seems to be in total disarray, and the whimsical and egoistic nature of Aegon doesn't help the cause. In one of the council meetings in this episode, we see the Master of Coin, Tywin Lannister, announcing that his brother Jason is gathering an army at Casterly Rock for the war. Meanwhile, Lord Jasper Wilde is speaking to the Hightowers in Oldtown, and Otto is busy speaking to his grandson, Daeron. Master Orwyle suggests that the army should be united in order to strike as one, but Tywin laughs it off as a silly idea, highlighting the lack of unity among the council members. On the other hand, Ser Criston proposes yet another bold idea after the failure of his earlier attempt to assassinate Rhaenyra. He suggests that he'll lead a small army into the Riverlands, which he deems to be the key to the war. He wishes to gather support from the surrounding regions and push forward, but Alicent doesn't approve of this courageous idea. However, King Aegon's quick to approve of this strategy because he's clearly not someone to back away from daring ideas and conflicts. He even prepares to fly out himself and presumably do something for glory. Nobody's capable enough to stop his silly, ambitious plan, and he's simply surrounded by a bunch of yes-men who don't have the courage to point out his wrongs.
And in his courage and wisdom flies with them.
Did Larys just save King Aegon? He might like to think of himself as a worthy successor of Aegon the Conqueror, but the whimsical and arrogant King Aegon is only a pale shadow of the glorious Targaryen past. His decision to ride out on a dragon and meet Cole in the battlefield is opposed by almost everyone, but there's no denying Aegon his opportunity to seek glory. He gets dressed up in his armor and almost prepares to set out for war when Larys walks in, just in time. He does some solid negative counseling by suggesting that there are rumors that Alicent manipulated Aegon to fly into battle so that she could rule with Aemond in his stead. This rattles Aegon enough to abandon his quest, and Larys may have just saved the life of his king. Aegon is yet to prove his battle credentials, and it's quite difficult to assume the outcome of the duel if he faced dragon riders from the other side. Will the brief conflict between Aegon and Aemond have wider consequences? After being manipulated by Larys against heading into battle on his dragon, King Aegon heads to the brothel for some merriment with his knights and a new squire. Here, Aegon comes across Aemond lying peacefully with the same lady who took his virginity years ago. For reasons unknown, Aegon finds this hilarious and he makes fun of his brother publicly. There's a quick moment when Aemond almost looks like he'll punch some sense into the arrogant king, but his composure takes over soon. He walks out of the room and offers the lady to the squire for the pleasure of Aegon and his men. While the scene might not be so significant, it's worth noting that Aemond is the last person that Aegon should antagonize. He might face the result soon, because the narrative has already established that this woman is very special for Aemond. Ser Criston Cole, the knight who almost got charred to death. Ser Criston Cole isn't exactly the most lovable character in the series, but one certainly can't question his courage. The idea to head to the Riverlands with a small group of trained soldiers was a bold one, and he almost paid for this rash decision with his life. Before starting off on his journey, Cole is joined by Alicent's older brother Ser Gawain Hightower, whom you might remember from the jousting competition in Season 1. He's clearly displeased that his father has been removed as the Hand of the King, but he joins Cole for the mission nevertheless with a handful of his men. The journey, however, soon takes a turn for a deadly consequence. Baela, who was earlier ordered by Rhaenyra to keep a watch for enemies, spots them all while riding her dragon Moondancer. Criston Cole spots the dragon just in time as he engages in a brief argument with Gawain, and both of them make a dash for the safety of the woods. Baela gives them a quick chase, but once they reach deep into the woods, she gives up the search and flies away. Also, it's worth remembering that Baela was strictly advised to only keep watch and observe instead of engaging the enemy, and Criston Cole has a narrow escape from being charred to a crisp. After the setback, Gawain's temper and arrogance seem to have dropped down considerably, and he agrees to Cole's new strategy of moving under the cover of dark and moving through the tree lines to avoid detection by the dragons overhead. Is Rhaenyra's mission going to set up the future of House Targaryen? Queen Rhaenyra realizes that the bloody conflict is knocking on the doors, and things will soon take a turn for the worse. Keeping this in mind, Rhaenyra opts for a safety measure and assigns an important task to her stepdaughter Rhaena, who happens to be the youngest of Daemon's daughters. She's asked to raise Rhaenyra's youngest sons and make them strong and mature away from the conflict. Rhaenyra asks her to seek refuge in Pentos, which is far away from the destruction zones. And young Rhaena also has to watch the baby dragons Stormcloud and Tyraxes on the way. Besides, she must also look after a clutch of dragon eggs that are extremely vulnerable and precious in these troubled times. On plain sight, it might seem like Rhaena is nothing more than a glorified babysitter, and she's simply being sent away because she's not bound to any dragon and won't be useful in the upcoming war. However, upon a closer scrutiny of the strategy, it reveals a clever plan that can safeguard the future of the Targaryen house, irrespective of the outcome of the war. The young princes will be safe with Rhaena, and the dragon eggs might be key to the future of dragons following the devastation of the war. In fact, we're also wondering wondering if these eggs are the ones that eventually come into Daenerys' possession after over a century. Rhaena might have hesitantly obliged to the orders that take her away, but she might be the most important character when the rebuilding process begins.
I'm the son of Balon the Brave.
What's the deal with Ulf? We all knew that we had to keep an eye out for Ulf appearing in this episode, and the narrative doesn't disappoint. He claims to be secretly a Targaryen, and he proclaims himself as the bastard son of Balon the Brave. Basically, Ulf is Daemon's bastard half-brother, and he tells his buddies how Rhaenyra's son Jace Velaryon is the rightful heir. However, he also proves himself to be a smart fellow when King Aegon walks into the tavern, and he greets the king with utmost respect. Clearly, Ulf knows how to watch out for himself, and going by the narrative in the books, we expect him to assume a key role in the upcoming narrative. He becomes a dragon rider during the battle and fights valiantly, and we don't think that the show will change this about him.
No. What?
Is the meeting between Alicent and Rhaenyra futile? The two old friends are now sworn enemies, but Rhaenyra still seems to have a sense of trust on Alicent's wise thinking. She believes that Alicent wouldn't want the uncontrollable bloodshed and lives lost, and she wants to make one last effort to meet her and talk her out of the impending war. After learning about Criston Cole's small army, she realizes that the threat of war is more real than ever before, and she decides to exhaust her last preventative option. After strategizing with the White Worm, she enters King's Landing disguised as a scepter and makes her way to the Great Sept of Baelor. This is the only place outside the castle where Alicent can be found, and it's the only chance for Rhaenyra to speak to her undetected. The plan works, and she finds herself face to face with her old friend. It's an emotional reunion, even though much has happened over the years to sour the relationship. They trade blames over who's tried to hurt the other more, and unfortunately, the final outcome is nothing to hope for. Rhaenyra had probably hoped to come to a settlement, but Alicent simply informs her that it's too late for peace terms, and it's also a solemn reminder that the likes of Rhaenyra and Alicent are not the real decision makers, even from their powerful position. However, the meeting between the two also unravels a secret about the king when Alicent claims, swearing on her dead mother, that Viserys changed his mind regarding the succession on his deathbed. This leaves Rhaenyra shaken because she realizes Alicent probably isn't lying, and the two eventually part ways with no clear solution for the conflict ahead. The only reason that we think that the meeting may not have been completely useless is because now the two friends at least know about each other's intentions to some extent. Anyone who's read the books will know that war is inevitable, but maybe we can expect some mercy from them in the decisive moments of the battle, although it's still too early to comment in this regard.
Helena,
I forgive you.
For what sin did Helena forgive Alicent? This is a small but insightful moment in the episode, and it almost escapes your attention given the eventful storytelling in this one. Alicent goes up to Helena and tries to comfort her for her loss. She's still a grieving mother, but she seems to have strengthened herself considerably. She brushes off the words of wisdom from Alicent, such as sadness is a condition of motherhood, and it's clear that Helena needs no advice, but simply time on her own to heal from her wounds. She's also quite generous when she tells Alicent that she's forgiven her. Helena doesn't specify what the forgiveness is really for, but it can be assumed that it's for Alicent's illicit relationship with Cole, which Helena accidentally walked into on the night of Jaehaerys' murder. Marvelous verdict, an episode to rouse the viewers from slumber. The slow and steady days are over, and it seems like House of the Dragon is finally headed to the decisive climax that we're all eager to find out. The war preparations are in full swing, and this episode even announces the first fatalities of the war when a skirmish results in a fatal battlefield. Too many interesting story arcs have branched out, and now you can expect the narrative to pick up speed. For those who were starting to get bored of the relatively slow narrative in the first two episodes, you'll find a welcome change in this one, and you can be sure that the saga will continue. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on the episode and the major events that have taken place so far. Also, tell us what you think of Sir Criston Cole's bizarre mission to take control of the upcoming war. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.